Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.
Last night, the House resoundingly rejected President-elect Donald Trump's new plan to fund operations and get rid of the debt ceiling as Democrats and dozens of Republicans refused to accommodate his demands.
Yeah, Trump took to social media overnight, posting, quote, Congress must get rid of or extend out to perhaps 2029 the ridiculous debt ceiling. Without this, we should never make a deal. Remember, the pressure is on whoever is president, end quote.
After failing to reach the two-thirds threshold needed, House Speaker Mike Johnson appeared determined to reassess before tonight's midnight deadline.
Let's get to our political panel this Friday morning. Joining us now to break down what could happen today and what happened last night, President and Executive Editor of the Daily Signal, Robert Bluey, and former New York State Senator David Carlucci. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Robert, let's start with you. President-elect Trump is being very vocal about extending the debt ceiling. Some people aren't surprised he's engaging in the conversation just a month before inauguration. Does it make sense, Robert, for him to be this involved, and is it hurting or helping what his administration wants to eventually do once they get in?
Good morning, Joe. And I certainly understand why Donald Trump wants to do this. It would be one thing that's off his plate that Joe Biden has to deal with right now, and it gives Trump the opportunity to focus on other policy issues. However, the problem here is that Republicans are on record for a long time opposing a debt ceiling increase, and for good reason. Remember, extending the debt limit out number of years, as Trump has suggested, is essentially taking somebody who's already in debt, as we know the United States Treasury is, and giving them another credit card to spend even more money. So I think if Republicans are serious about the efforts that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy hope to accomplish with the Department of Government Efficiency, they should focus on cutting spending right now, not necessarily giving the government more borrowing power for the future.
You know, David, if they don't come to an agreement by 11:59 tonight, what happens? How will this impact the everyday American?
Well, it's hard to tell exactly. It depends on how long this happens. Every hour it goes on, I think more and more people will feel that squeeze. But if you're a federal employee, depending on what you do, that'll impact you. But I think Robert is exactly right. I'm scratching my head. I'm trying to understand what the Republican Party stands for. I know Democrats have been criticized over this election, but Republicans, it sounds like it's just the Donald Trump party. And the idea that now the fiscal responsible party, what they allegedly stood for, is out the door. And this is something we tried to bring up on the campaign trail about spending. Donald Trump put us further in debt than the Biden administration, than most administrations. And it's just amazing, this juxtaposition, this 180 that the Republican Party has done. And I think it's a big problem for them going forward. It's just eating away at the foundation of the party, that you look at it and you don't recognize it. You don't know what it stands for. And we're going to have a lot of these knee-jerk moments, I think, because you see that the Republican Party is 100% dependent on Donald Trump. And I think that's a big problem for the American people.
Robert, David, does make sense. Donald Trump's administration, the first go-around, spent $8 trillion, I believe. So what he says is true. But I guess, Robert, the question is, can he turn around and say, I don't want to do that again, because we're at $36 trillion right now, the national debt. So my question is this. 38 Republicans joined 197 Democrats to tank that bill last night. Does he have a point? David's point as far as maybe turning this thing around because you don't recognize it? And could Elon Musk be behind the scenes saying, I can't do my job in charge of Doge if you don't get a hold of this and say something? So is he sort of pulling the strings on this?
There is a big question as to how we come to a resolution, first of all, in this particular moment with the shutdown just hours away. But as it pertains to next year, when Donald Trump is actually in the White House and calling the shots, I expect that you will see Donald Trump put forward a budget that cuts spending. I mean, he did that consistently. Remember, a lot of that spending came in the latter part of his first term during COVID. And so COVID was partly responsible for that. The problem was that Joe Biden put lighter fluid on it and made the problem even worse. And and that led to the inflation crisis that ultimately was the demise of his presidency and one of the reasons that Kamala Harris did not win in 2024. It's a problem that we need to get our hands on. If the government continues to spend money recklessly, as it has over the course of the past couple of decades, then yes, the American people are going to be saddled with higher prices at the grocery store. Their rents will go up, and it's a problem that is going to perpetuate for the future, Joe.
You know, David, House Speaker Mike Johnson really has his work cut out for him today. It's going to have to pull that rabbit out of the hat. Do you think he's going to be able to get this done today? I mean, the clock is ticking.
Well, it all depends on what's in that package and what he can negotiate. And I think this is the real problem that becomes, right? On the campaign trail, you just blame your opponent, you blame the incumbent. And now Donald Trump inherits this, and he's got an awful lot of power, but he's not using it in a way that he said he would on the campaign trail. He talked about lowering prices. He talked about reducing inflation. Everything he's looking to do will only increase the amount of money we have to spend on buying everyday products. So it's a little bit of that cat and mouse, that switcheroo here that we see that Donald Trump and Mike Johnson is doing. But remember, Mike Johnson is also 100% dependent on Donald Trump. And that's the real problem. And that's what I hope the American people see. I hope Congress grows a spine and says, look, we've got to do our job. We have to be responsible. But yet they are 100% dependent on Donald Trump. And that could be good in some ways, but it's bad in a multitude of ways. And I think Mike Johnson has a real problem on his hands. And unless they change up their strategy here, they're not going to be able to get this done.
And I think you're right, David. Everyone agrees. Let's be responsible. Let's stop adding pork to a bill that was 30 pages. Now it's 1,500.